Hi everyone, I'm Amy. This is my wife Maggie. Hello. And together we are ThinkerThemer, and this is our new series that we've been wanting to make for a very long time, and it's called 10, out of 10. And the comma really makes the
It's very
sentence.
important.
It's very important.
Essential, yes.
Because without the comma, it would change the meaning of the sentence.
Yeah.
So this is not games that are 10 out of 10, although they might be.
Some of them may be.
Some of them might be. Who knows? You'll have to wait and see.
None of them may be.
Maybe none of them. But what we're going to be doing is rating our entire board game collection out of 10. And
10 games at a time.
10 games at a time. 10, out of 10.
Yeah.
Everyone understands the premise
Just
of the
like
sentence.
a joke. It's it's a good joke when you have to really explain it for hours and hours. Yeah.
But why are we doing this now? Well, there's many reasons why we're doing this now. The first reason is that people keep asking us, I'm not going to name names, but some people in the comments keep asking us to do our top 10 list of board games of all time. And the problem with that is, well, we don't have a very good memory.
I have a terrible memory. I am goldfish. Yeah, memory.
And we're constantly being faced with new games, which is a great problem to have.
Yes.
But we're constantly reviewing the hotness, and you just kind of lose track of, like, how does this game compare to a game that I played 5 years ago? Like, I can't compare it.
Or longer.
Yeah. And so now this is going to make us reflect on each game individually to see if our older games in our collection really stand up to the test of time. We'll give everything a score, which ultimately is going to lead to us to be able to create our top 10. Here it is, definitively, with
quantitatively
our
unequivocal list.
Love
of
a
top
quantitative
10.
list.
Yeah.
So that is one
As
reason.
opposed to my, emotional. This feels like it's it's in the top 10.
Give it a number, Maggie. Give it a number.
Where though?
Quantify
Where
those
exactly
feelings.
Does it sit?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
how much do you love me with a decimal point?
Yeah, so we will be doing it, and we will be doing it with one decimal place, because you know there's a lot of shades of 7 out of 10, so we need to add that decimal place in. The second
exactly
thing,
10 shades.
there is. The second thing the second reason why we're doing this is because we have a BGG account, but we don't rate games in there, and we want to have a record of our collection and to actually fill that in with our ratings of each of the games. We haven't quite thought how to do that because Maggie and I often have different opinions about games, so we might just use the average to create a ThinkerThemer average, and then perhaps put in the comments of the BGG review our individual scores.
Makes sense.
But that's another reason, because we want to really build out that BGG account.
Because one of the things is people kind of come to the channel and they're like, well, I want to get to know, obviously a lot of people that have been watching for a while, you can get a sense for, what will Maggie usually like? What will Amy like? What are the two of them gonna, feel like playing? But if you're new to the channel, often you're like, but I don't know what you like, so I don't know if something that you like I'm gonna like.
Give me a quick summary of what you like.
Yeah, exactly. So that becomes the written quick summary of like, this is the type of gamer that they are.
It's going to take us some time, but we're going to fill out our collection.
It's a start.
It's a start. And the third reason, and important reason, is that our collection is getting out of control. And
again.
So and we need to do some culling. And often at the end of our videos, we say, will we keep this or not? And sometimes it's a no, but ultimately it's staying in our collection.
It's like, no, that's definitely leaving. And it's just staying there.
It's still there. You might see some of them in the piles. But so what we want to do is really go back through all of our games, see if we still love them, we want to hang on to them, and if we don't, or they don't have a role in our collection, they need to be moved on to a household that's going to play them. That is the other reason. One final thing before we get into some rating of some games is that ratings can be extremely reductive, and that's the reason why we haven't done it in the past, because when we do our reviews, we like to cover off all of the positives and negatives about the game, how the game feels to play, and why you might like it if your taste differs to ours. And so as we go through this series and we talk through our ratings of each individual game, I want you to bear in mind that that one number is a summary of all of the complexities of our individual preferences for games and how that comes to life with that particular title. It doesn't mean that it's not a great game. It doesn't mean that it's not a game for you. It could be a 10 out of 10 for you and a 6 out of 10 for me. And that's just because of how we feel about different elements of games.
And ultimately, even though it's a number, a quantitative, factual number, it's still a subjective, overall.
100%.
Yeah.
Very subjective.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is take all of this with a grain of salt. I know people are excited for us to rate games, and also, there's a lot of games in our collection that we've never spoken about. So this will be an opportunity to really highlight some of those games and why we love them or think they're just fine.
You're like, I love this game. It's a 2 for me. It's like, wait, what?
2 out of 10.
Yeah. You're like, this game does not work at all. It's a 9.
Yeah. So if you're excited about this series...
What's their scale like? I don't understand.
If you're excited about this series, please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and now let's get into some board game ratings. So the first game that we're going to talk about today is a smaller title, and it is called Dice Miner. And Dice Miner it's not that old of a title. We haven't had it in our collection that long. But in this game, you start.
Okay, well, we're dwarves in the mines, and we're trying to explore the mines, and not knowing that, I'm going to say kind of knowing that we may encounter things like dragons and, things like
the caving in on us.
Yeah, but also, it's also about celebrating the downtime and having a beer with a mate. So, yeah, that's dice.
the theme.
It's dice.
It's dice. In the title, in the title, it says dice, and that's exactly what it is. You are mining for dice in a mountain, and that mountain comes to life as like a 3D cardboard structure, a feat of cardboard engineering, if you will.
Yeah.
In the deluxe edition, it's actually a much more very dramatic plastic kind of mountain, but we have just the regular cardboard edition, which is also very impressive.
Works perfectly well. Yeah.
But in this game, what you're going to be doing is on your turn, you will be drafting a die from the mountain, and really you can only take it from a certain position in the mountain when it's at the top. And you're going to be collecting these die and trying to create sets. And the sets are going to give you victory points. And that's essentially the game. And there's a bit of interaction because you are also going to be able to draft beers. And beers as a symbol on the die are really interesting because they are a tool that you can use to be able to draft from the sides of the mountain. So if you decide, hey, I want to break the rules and not draft from the top, I want to draft from the sides, you can give a beer to an opponent. You say cheers and give that beer to an opponent. And the opponent gets a benefit to that because the dice is going to contribute to their sets, but you then get to draft 2 dice.
That's it.
From the sides of the mountains, which is going to help you. But let's talk about this game and how it feels to play. It is a really luck-driven game. You are rolling dice in this game, and that always brings with it a huge, huge amount of luck.
Yeah.
But the reason why this game is in our collection is because actually the game is just really fun and entertaining for what it is. So you go into this game knowing that you're drafting dice and you're going to be rolling dice, but the way that you kind of collect dice over the course of 3 rounds means that you get this bigger and bigger trove of dice. And at the end, you're rolling like 20 dice
it's
all
a
at
very
once.
satisfying cumulative experience of, a very tactile handful of dice.
And it's a filler game. It's easy to explain, and people just have fun with trying, pushing their luck and trying to roll a certain combination.
And I really enjoy the mise en scène is like the setting on a screen. Mise en place is the setting of food. I think this is probably like the mise en table because it's like on the table. I just love the table presence. I guess that's
probably
I'm
an easy way of
fancy,
saying it.
unnecessarily fancy way of saying table presence. Having that, that standing mountain there where you're grabbing your dice from. I really enjoy that.
It does have great table presence, and even though we're not really a fan of luck in games, I really enjoyed this one just because I don't think it's trying to be anything that it's not. I think that it is really fun, great filler. It feels satisfying. There's ways of mitigating the dice rolls with using the magic dice in this game that allow you to kind of re-roll and push your luck. Still luck because you're still re-rolling the dice. But yeah, I also love that there's some negative elements in this game in that you might be forced to take hazard die that are going to be negative victory points, but then you can kind of try and mitigate that and actually flip it around and turn those into positive points. So Yeah, I don't know. It's just really fun. So what rating did I give this? Interesting. I don't know what you gave it.
Well, should we start with you giving your rating first, and then I'll follow? So
me,
it's like a thinker rating and then a themer rating?
This is a very solid 7.5 for me. And it's a 7.5 because for me, it is just a really nice filler. I feel like it has a very unique role in our role, if you will, a dice roll in our collection, because it does have a strong luck element. And some gamers and some friends of ours really enjoy that kind of light luck-driven game, but there's enough in it that I find it really interesting as well, and I'm very happy to play this for a couple of rounds of this.
Nice.
And I like the little asymmetric characters that are quite easy to understand how they work in there as well, because it's just giving you extra die faces. So I don't know. I think it's a solid filler.
Nice. Well, I'm going to give it a 7.1 because, which is a little bit, lower than yours.
Yeah.
Because again, I love, obviously it's not like an immersive thematic experience, but I really enjoy, playing through this puzzle, and I love that table presence of that mountain. So for those reasons.
Why is it not higher?
I think it's not higher because it's still a little bit, you still kind of, I guess the luck element, there's, and also it's still fairly, abstract as an experience. You're not, you're not really building or creating something that compelling in a, thematic way.
Yeah,
so that's probably why it sort of sits a little bit lower.
That's true. And it is a little bit fun. And
it's still a good rating.
And Maggie hates fun, so that's probably why. So that is Dice Miner. Next game off the list. Let's bring one from your side.
So the next game is going to be Brian Boru, Hiking of Ireland. So Brian Boru, Hiking of Ireland is, it's an interesting game because it's sort of trick-taking based, but the main areas that are referring to, obviously, the Brian Boru, the way that Brian Boru gained the advantages was largely through being able to kind of fight off the Vikings, and through political marriages, and through gaining favor with the church. And those are kind of like the three suits that are represented, or kind of like the three main areas of the game that are represented here, plus a little bit of area control. So,
Well, mechanically, the combination of area control and trick taking is very unique, and we've seen more games integrate trick taking into the mechanics, and I am all for it.
Yeah, I really enjoy it.
If you watch the channel, you probably know that we love trick taking. This game is really interesting in the way the cards work in this game, because at the beginning of each round, you're going to be drafting your hand of cards, and that makes for an interesting decision because the cards have either a primary action that you get to take if you win the trick, and then either one or two secondary actions depicted on the cards as well that you get to take if you lose the trick. And the lower cards, or the cards of the lower values that are less likely to win a trick, also have more powerful actions. And so it's when you're drafting the cards, you're thinking through a lot of things, and ultimately what you're trying to do in the game is affect really a few different tracks, if you will. There's the marriage track, the church track, and then there's also a bit of mitigating some risk, because every round there's going to be this Viking invasion, and you want to have some presence there. You want to help with that. And everything that you're doing is going to earn you different points or influence in different ways. But ultimately, when you win a trick with the lead suit, the highest number in the lead suit, it's going to allow you to add to your area control.
Yeah, your presence in that area.
Yeah, in the different regions on the board. And that is going to be worth a lot of victory points at the end of the game. And so there's just, it's really interesting the way this game plays off the action selection versus the trick-taking element, and then whether you want to affect the kind of mini games that are going on around the board, or the main game of that area control. And the area control is highly interactive, which is, something that I always really enjoy.
I less so. I tend to stick more to the other mini games.
And so, I love trick-taking, I love area control. For me, the game... Well, let's talk about my rating of this game. So my rating is 7.7 from a thinker perspective. It's 7.7 because I just really enjoy the mechanics. I really enjoy every time I play this game. But for me, it is still on it's kind of easy to get into. I think the iconography is really nice and clear, which makes it a great game to just, if you're at a con or something, it's such an easy game to grab and teach to a group of people. It has a really satisfying feel of playing a bigger game. But also, there's also not a lot in there to continue exploring.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Yeah,
so it's like from a replayability perspective, sometimes it feels like it's, I'm doing the same thing each time. But I still enjoy the interesting decisions that you get to make about each individual trick when you're playing, and like, what is my strategy here? What do I need to get done? I really enjoy that. So that's why I gave it a 7.7, and I would like to keep it in our collection.
Okay, well, my rating for this is a 7.5. I'm always just a few points. I'm a harsher critic.
You are a harsh critic.
In many areas. Sometimes I'll give a rating and something, and Amy's like, whoa, like, why? I'm like, well, because of this and this, and then I'll be like, I can be flippant. But no, so this is a 7.5 for me. I really enjoy this game. Again, it's not the most, immersively thematic experience. I do enjoy how much, or like the thought that was put into those 3 suits and why, in terms of the context of like the historical context, or the setting for the game. I enjoy the whole concept of like, who's gonna get to marry, whatever character is gonna, it's the political marriage of that round. But ultimately, I just really enjoy that. As you were mentioning, that decision of like, ooh, do I want to win this trick and get the top thing, or it can actually be quite powerful. Particularly sometimes if you're playing those other kind of little mini games of like, the church influence and the Viking stuff. It's like, I can actually get a lot more done by not winning that and using that bottom action. So I enjoy this game, and I agree with you that it's like it's a game that I'll, at any point, if anyone's like, hey, do you want to play a game of Bramber? I'll be like, yeah, absolutely. But I do agree that over time you are essentially like not much changes or shifts within the game.
It's a simple combination of 2 mechanics, but I feel like what I appreciate about it is that combining 2 mechanics can sometimes feel overwhelming to new players, but the way in which it's done here is very simple with clean iconography. It makes it easy to get into, easy to understand.
It feels very clean and very elegant.
I also really like that kind of endgame decision about the scoring of the diversity of regions.
Oh, that's right.
Versus having the most in one region, like that kind of choice that you have with the final marriage. So anyway, a really interesting game. Brian Boru staying in our collection as well.
Nice.
So let's talk about another more recent game, San Francisco. So very recent. If you watch Small Talk, you're probably aware of our thoughts of San Francisco. But this game was one that we picked up at Gen Con. It is a 2022 release. It's a Rainer Knizia game, and essentially this is a drafting game where you are trying to build out the boroughs of San Francisco, and the way that you're doing that is by creating rows of the same neighborhood by drafting cards of that color from a central draft location. But the interesting thing about this is on your turn, you are either going to be adding to the cards available to draft, or taking all of one type of neighborhood.
Yeah, one of the columns from the available kind of contracts.
From the available cards, and speaking of contracts, they're actually this little token that is probably the most interesting part about this game, because there are these contracts that are going to act as a bit of a penalty or a catch-up mechanic, and a little bit of, kind of, in a sense of...
it's like a hold your horses, don't get too excited, don't get too far ahead. It's like you've already taken on a lot of projects, so you need to kind of hold back.
It's a mechanism that penalizes you for drafting too frequently, and basically it does put the brakes on you being able to draft, because you can only draft more cards of a single type of neighborhood than you have contracts available to you. I think I've said that right. It's very convoluted.
So it's like a column needs to have, more of those available cards than the number of tiles, of contract tiles that you've got.
Yeah, but then also those piles of a single neighborhood start to get more and more attractive. We've, that kind of drafting we've seen in a few different games before. But as you draft like a full set, you can add them to your neighborhood. But then there's this interesting area area majority thing that's going on with some of the symbols on the card, where there's like workers on the card and you want to have the most workers in any particular row or neighborhood. And then you can also build these like 3D buildings, and then
skyscrapers,
and then there's these cable
another
cars.
feat of engineering, the way that they kind of come together.
They were really cool. That's a really cool element of the game.
So hard to kind of make happen during the game, because you need to have the right number of workers placed, or the number of people in the adjacent cards that are placed around
a foundation card as well.
Yeah,
so it is tricky,
and then they're worth
1 point. And then they're worth one victory
After all
point.
that work, like
the scoring in this game is so strange because it's so low, and then it also has a decimal place, so something could be worth 2.5 points, and often that will win you the game as that half point. Yeah, so really low scoring game. There's also cable cars, and so there's a bit of networking element to it as well, where you're trying to create the longest path of like cable cars.
That's one of the majority conditions.
To place the most cable cars. But ultimately this game has a lack of tension in it that doesn't probably make it suitable for our gaming preferences. So it feels like, again, one of those cup of tea games, like it's very easy breezy drafting, but for me there's a bit too much going on for it to be that simple of that lack of tension for me. So I don't have a reason to pull it off a shelf, say, with a smaller filler, like a smaller card game that doesn't take up this much shelf space. And the length
as well. So it's quite a long game.
It is quite a long game, maybe too long.
For a fairly simple game that is also not simple enough to teach newbies that easily, that they're gonna... So it sort of sits in a strange in-between space.
So what did I rate this? I gave it a 6.5.
Okay.
So one of the lower rating games, for all the reasons that I just described. I do feel like it sits in an awkward place for me. It's a little bit too simple, but also not easy enough to get to the table, and it runs a little bit long. So what did you give it?
I gave it a 6.6. So
slightly higher.
Slightly higher than you. And I think because I think because I don't mind that more relaxing element, the fact that it doesn't have that intense competitive tension. Although ultimately it is a competitive game, it's one of those games where like throughout the game you can almost forget to keep track on like who's really winning this, because it's not that easy. I mean, I guess you could, but I think ultimately it's a 6.6 for me because I didn't mind it. Like I always found myself having I had an okay time playing,
It's a fun time.
It's an okay time.
Yeah.
Also, I really like the colors of it. I know that the graphic design has been a bit of or the illustrations have been a bit of I love the cover art.
Yes.
More than it
doesn't quite come
to the actual player board and the cards, but I really like the color choice that they have used for those. So when I'm playing it, I feel good. I feel good playing it. But it's not something that I would ever be like, let's play San Francisco.
Yeah. So this game, I think, am I right in saying that we're going to cull this game?
Yes, I think this game is going to be moved on to another
Somebody
household.
who can enjoy that a little bit more.
One pile of, we're going to have to put games in my pile.
I'm just going to build up a wall in front of the camera.
Tower of piece over there. All right, so the next game is That Time You Killed Me, which is a very, very abstract but very interesting concept of, head-to-head. It's a two-player game. You're playing head-to-head, trying to kind of... let's not beat around the bush here. Kill your opponent by making them across different periods of time, so past, present, and future. So I always like to think of this as almost like chess across three boards.
It is.
So in this game, yes, we're kind of playing at time. We're time traveling and trying to kind of capture one another and either make ourselves go into... I can never remember the terms for those, like, what is it? Like when you... is it like a time paradox or something when you like collapse yourself into yourself if you
So it causes a paradox when you make an opponent run into themselves. But I think one of the more interesting elements about this game is the fact that on your turn you are using a temporal focus. You're choosing which board you want to focus on.
Past, present, future.
Past, present, or future. But the interesting part about it is that if you move a more future version of yourself into the past, it creates a copy. So it actually creates or spawned a new pawn in the future, in that same spot in the future, because if you travel back in into the past, that past version of yourself is going to grow up into another version.
Lost. I
love that about time travel.
You're very good with time travel stuff.
I just always enjoy it, and I enjoy it like when you watch a movie and you're like, hang on a second, that doesn't quite work with the time travel. But anyway, so this game is a really interesting abstract game because of that time element, because you are trying to replicate yourself in the future to create more versions of yourself, because ultimately in this game, when you don't have a presence in 2 of the 3 time periods, then you lose the game. Yeah. And so as what you're trying to do is you're trying to force that to happen to your opponent, either by kind of pushing them off the board or by making them run into themselves. And what's really cool about this particular production from Pandasaurus is that each of the, you can kind of work your way through the game, and it gets more and more complex, and objects become part of this game.
The modules is the bit that I really enjoy.
The different modules introduce new objects that interact with you and your opponent and interact with the time travel in a different way. And that's what makes this game really interesting.
And they thematically make a lot of sense, like in terms of like, a particular object, the way that they would behave when you move it in the past, the way that it impacts the future, the present and the future iterations of it.
Yeah, and when I was thinking about my rating of this, I am someone who loves abstract games, and I really do enjoy the concept of this game, and I really enjoyed playing our way through the modules. But for me, I haven't found a lot of occasions to pull it back off the shelf, and part of the reason for that, I think, is just, I enjoyed playing it all the way through, but it is the variability of the game really does come from those modules, and also the fun of it was like discovering those additional things.
The whole, like, how does this work? Oh, of course, it would work like this because of X, Y.
And so I kind of want to...
We're being very cryptic because they're a bit of a spoiler. Like, they kind of come in these, don't open until, you're ready
until you've played one. And I
exactly.
kind of want to, for like, spoiler alert, just going to say that we'll probably move this game on. And the reason being is just that I want someone else to experience that journey through the different modules. But also, if I want to play a 2-player abstract game, I have many games that fulfill that in a much simpler way that's easier to explain. Because with an abstract game, usually you can get it to the table and you're just like, okay, this is how you move your pieces. Yeah. And what you're trying to do is X. They're trying to push me off the board, or you're trying to like capture all of my pieces, and you can get into them really quickly, even with someone who has never played that game before. And usually the rule set is very simple, but it's hard to master the strategy around that. This game has just a couple, because of the time travel element, it's a bit harder to get your head around how to strategically win in this game. And I found that when I progressed through the modules, that helped me understand, as I was playing it more and more, I was like, oh, okay, I'm getting the strategy more and more. But often when I play these abstract games, I don't have that amount of time with an opponent. And you don't love abstract games. No. So it's never going to reward that, like...
I don't like abstract games, and I also don't like when it's just like a very intense, just head-to-head, I'm taking you down sort of thing. And so that's partly why you also don't really get to play it. And it is, as you said, a commitment to then teach someone new that's just coming in that might like that type of game.
That's right. And it's only 2 players, so then in terms of not being a quick, easy to get off the shelf abstract, it's like, well, then it's also kind of limited in how you can or like the occasions that it has. So I'm interested to know what you gave it.
Well, I just don't want to break the pattern.
No, we're breaking the pattern.
Oh no.
No.
This is going to be confusing.
We're being disruptive.
All right, so that time you killed me, I actually gave this game a 7, which feels very, very high.
It feels really high.
For something that is very extremely abstract. But I'm going to explain myself. I'm going to justify myself. The reason I gave this a 7 is because even though it's very abstract, and it's not the type of game that I usually enjoy. I don't like chess. I don't like head-to-head. I'm figuring out, I'm going to catch you. I don't like any of that. I just thought the concept of the 3 times being so clever, and on top of that, the way that those modules came in and introduced those sort of objects and the way that those behaved, like I think that bit is what won me over. So even though it's not a game that I would want to like get off the shelf and play myself, I have to like kind of applaud it. Be like, yeah, well done. That was an enjoyable discovery experience for me.
Yeah, and I gave it a 7.1, so not that much higher than Maggie. Still, I think it is a really solid, interesting game, and the mechanics are very unique, and I really appreciate about that. But for me, it was a bit of a one-shot play all the way through, and for that reason, that's kind of holding it back a little bit. I also just wanted to touch on the fact that I love this rule book, the way it's written. I believe Peter Haywood actually did a lot of the writing for it, and it is really funny, and it just, for an abstract game, it just has so much personality. Yes. So I really enjoyed that about it as well. So that's our ratings for that Time You Kill Me. It probably will be moved on to a household that can appreciate it and play through the modules. I'll put it on my side so that we don't have an endless tower on your side. Okay, the next game that we're going to talk about is Mercado de Lisboa. And so this takes place in a market in Lisbon. But actually what's interesting about this game is that it is taking a very small part of the game, Lisboa, which you can see on our shelf behind us, and turning it into a standalone, more filler style game. So it took that kind of winning corner component of that game and distilled it and like rethemed it into this standalone, smaller, shorter, easier to get off the shelf than Lisboa experience. And in this game, you're going to be trying to attract customers to your market stall in order to make lots of money. And that's
how commerce generally works.
That's how it works, And you're also going to be trying to race your opponents to score these customers. And so what you're going to be doing in this game is the game is, the board is the market itself that consists of rows and columns and a grid-like layout. And what you're going to be doing is placing your stalls out into this layout. And interestingly, the more popular a row or column becomes with stalls, then the more you're going to have to pay in order to go there and reap the benefits of the foot traffic going through there. But then you also have the option of bringing in the customers and scoring that particular row and column if you've got a stall presence there.
Based on their preferences of what those customers are wanting.
So the customers only want to have particular types of foods. You can also increase the value of your stall by having adjacent restaurants, so you can build up the amount of money you're going to score at the time that it is going to score. And so there's this interesting dynamic in this game where it's about when do I score it and do I score it before someone else does, and keeping an eye on what your opponents are doing because you want to try and score a row or column before they do, or you want to get in on the action. And you want to also pick up those valuable customers before they do. So there's a lot about kind of racing in this game. But ultimately, it doesn't feel very tension heavy. It's a fairly, again, easy breezy kind of filler game where the thing that I will say about the game is that it always felt like it was a little bit predetermined what I should do. Like it felt like there was a good move that you should do or a good customer that you should take. So there's not a lot of room to move around the puzzle.
No, there's definitely, I remember feeling like it's sort of the tension builds more towards the end when you start getting fewer positions and when you can start to do a bit more of like a take that sort of semi-mean turns where you're like, oh, I really see that you want that thing there, but I'm going to put it over here. Or I'm
going to score it.
So I think ultimately it's another game that I find myself like, I have a fine time when I play it. But I'm never like, oh, I can't wait to get back into that, because it just felt fairly straightforward and fairly like, oh yeah, it sort of plays out as it does. And even the mood around the table is always like, okay, maybe I will, maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll do. It never becomes a.
It just didn't stay with me. The puzzle didn't stick with me at all. After we played every game, I was just kind of like, okay. like, okay, I played a game, okay, you know, someone won, but it wasn't like, oh, I can't wait to do something different next time.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of puzzles that I enjoy, just like the ones that linger with you and you're like, oh, next time, you know, I'm definitely going to get you next time, I'm going to beat you to this next time. It's
also, the other thing that Duck points of this for me is the fact that they didn't include Portuguese tarts. And Portuguese tarts are like, why wouldn't you? One, they're delicious. Two, the markets that we went to when we were in Lisbon, like those are the hottest stalls, and those are the places that you definitely want to go to. And it's like, why wouldn't you? Yeah,
the food choices around sushi and pizza it's like, not hugely thematic.
Yeah, it's just sort of it's an odd choice, which again, like it felt like a missed opportunity to draw me in to the world of, you know, the Mercado. Yeah.
So it didn't quite hit on theme. It didn't quite hit on mechanics for me. I haven't felt the need to pull this off the shelf. I never have been like, oh, I can't wait to play that game again. Let's get it off our shelf. So I do need to move this one on. And my score for this was 6.5. So if you're paying attention, kind of similar score, the same score to San Francisco. Mm-hmm. I kind of feel the same way about it. It's like, it's a game, a puzzle, but not one that like super excites me.
It's not a terrible game. No. It's just like, it's just like a fine game. Yeah. This is for the first time we're going to be evens. Like, it's a 6.5 for me as well.
There you go. Yeah. So
for the first time, we agree on something.
Mercado de Lisboa.
Yeah. So next one, should I go over here? The next one that we're going to be looking at is Kitchen Rush.
Now, I have such fond memories of this game because we dabbled in doing a playthrough for this game. We, rather than explain how the game works in our review of this, we decided to show, and that was just like a fun experience. I hope that we've improved a little bit in our run throughs.
I would hope so. You never really know,
but that was a fun time.
It was a fun
anyway,
time.
Sorry I interrupted you.
Well, no, so Kitchen Rush, we are playing as chefs in a kitchen, and we ultimately want to, this is a cooperative game. That's the other thing that we should say. We never co-op, and this is a co-op. This is probably one of the first times that we realize, hey, maybe we can co-op.
Maybe we can
if there's
cooperate.
Sand timers involved. If there's stress and sand timers involved. And that's what happens here. So all the different positions, if you've ever played games like Overcooked.
Yes, it's Overcooked, the board game.
Yeah, 100%. So where you're all kind of working together to fulfill orders in a certain amount of time, and you have set kind of objectives. And so it's like you either win or you lose type thing. But you're all kind of getting in each other's way. And so in this one, the way it's represented, like your workers are these sand timers. So there's sand timers in, each player's colors. And then there's also kind of like neutral sand timers that any player can manipulate. But because you need to kind of create a sequence of things, you bring your customers in, and then they've got set orders. And then you have to get those ingredients. You have to cook them. You have to plate them. Then those plates get dirty. You need to wash plates because we've run out of plates. So all of those sorts of things, you end up creating this, you placing your sand timer in that area to activate that task, and you have to wait for that sand timer to finish before you can move it to the other place. And you're kind of looking at your time, which I think is from memory is like 4 minutes for some of the to play out like your round. You're like, we're running out of time. Like, I mean, you're here. We need to do. And so it really feels like you are in a kitchen,
super
yelling
stressful.
Orders and going, we need this, or we need this, or this is gonna, this is overdue, or like so that becomes a very stressful. This is not a relaxing game. This is a very
anytime it's real time
game.
Any real time game is going to be usually pretty stressful. But with the sand timers, one thing that I want to talk about with cooperative games is that some people have a problem with someone being an alpha gamer and taking over and kind of making everything happen. It's very hard to do that in this game because of the fact that each player has their own sand timers that they're responsible for. And because you are so focused on what you're doing with your sand timers, like I can't also be looking too hard at what Maggie's doing or other players around the table because everyone's doing them simultaneously. You just hope that everyone's bringing it together in the way that, you can win as a group. So I like that element of it. But then there's also these like interactive elements because sometimes you'll need someone's help to get something done. So it's like, I need you to go and refill the spice bag because I'm going to need spices, or like we need to work together to fix the stove or unlock a pantry or whatever the case may be, whatever the game throws at you. So I really like that about the game. I also love the really tactile elements of the ingredients.
Yeah.
And they're really cute, and they're having the dry pantry too.
And
The dry pantry with just the pasta and bread versus the spices and then the fresh ingredients.
Yeah.
Like, I really enjoy that. And the other thing that I really like about this game, which is not usually my style at all, is the kind of campaign with this second edition of the game, because there was a previous edition of the game. The second edition, I believe it changed up the board. It made it so that you could stage the complexity of the game.
Yeah.
And that makes it way more accessible, because the simplest version of this game gives you the opportunity to learn how it works.
Yeah.
You could play it with, quite young children, I think.
You can graduate through the levels and not be thrown into the deep end. But also, you'll get to points where it's like, this is going to be very, very challenging, no matter how well organized your team is.
But the thematic elements of the campaign, I thought were really cool, because it felt like you were, at the beginning, you're starting a restaurant and everything's very like, you're dealing with the basics.
Yeah.
And then
it's
it
like
gets more and more layered. The
critic
coming in.
is coming.
Yeah. And so the elements that add, it kind of feels like, okay, well, now I've got a more successful restaurant, and so now I need more staff, and so these kind of tensions are going to weigh into the game. So it's a really nice thematic campaign, but on top of that, just a standalone game that is really fun to play. I really like cooperating as long as there's sand timers. That seems to be
what we've learned. Yeah,
that seems to be the common theme on this channel.
Rush and Kites have taught us anything, is that we will co-op
if there's sand timers. Yeah. If we don't have to talk to each other, just deal with sand timers.
If we can just yell at each other because there's something that's going to go horribly wrong.
Yeah. So I really did rate this game.
Interestingly, this is a game that, again, because there's so many games that we're constantly looking at, it doesn't hit the table that often, and yet whenever I look at it, like if you glance at it in the shelf, you're like, oh,
that's so fun.
Yeah, that's so fun. So it's like, it's not a game that I would be moving on, no matter how little playtime.
I'm going to check my rating.
Oh yeah, what was the rating?
I gave this a rating of 7.5.
Okay.
And I've just been raving about it. It's a little bit lower, and the reason why is just because, if you think about what we love on this channel, it's definitely heavy Euros, so it's never going to be in my top list. But it is such a solid game that really has a unique occasion and a unique feel about it too. Yeah. And so many of our friends love Overcooked, so it's just a great game to have around when people want to have that stressful kind of vibe rather than us sit back and strategize and
and like have a really
a very heady experience.
Yeah. So I give this a 7.3, which again, like you heard me raving about this. I'm like, that's a 7.3. Because obviously still, like I have a great time playing this, but it's very fun. And we all know how I feel about fun.
It's a lighter game experience.
It is a lighter game experience. But ultimately, I think I tend to give higher ratings to like some of the stuff that I just feel more, I don't know what it is, like more enthralled in the sense of like a discovery and like a depth to it. And this is more just almost mechanical, like stress in a good way, good kind of stress.
In a good way, yeah. 7.5, still a very solid score. What did you give it? 7.3. Still
a
very good
7.3.
Yeah. So that is Kitchen Rush. The next game is a game that we did a full review on as well, Boon Lake by Alexander Pfister. And this game is a really interesting bag of mechanics. And I have to say, one thing that I really appreciate about this game is, well, in this game, it's called Boon Lake, but you're actually working along the banks of a river.
Yeah. Boon Lake is the town that we are, helping create, discovering the lands and then building our settlements.
We're trying to build up our presence and our villages around this lake, and we're traveling down a lake. We're going to
river.
Oh, sorry. We're traveling. See, it's confusing me. The title's confusing me. We're traveling down a river, and we're doing a lot of mechanical things. This game is just. This game is the best of times and the worst of times. I don't even know where to start with this game, but essentially the thing that makes this game really unique is that you're going to be handing around or having in the center of the table, but generally when we've played this, it's passing around a board that has a number of different actions that you can select from. And they are going to be tiles that slide down such that when you pull one out to use it, all of the rest are going to move. And they also interact with a number that is on the side of the board that corresponds to the number of spaces that you can move along the river. So supposedly you're meant to look at this sheet of actions, choose an action that is going to allow you to get whatever you need to get done on the board done, but also that has the most power to push your boat forward so that you can select one of the bonuses that's along the river. And aside from the hilarious moments where I dropped the board
multiple times, yes, and you weren't the only one. Like,
no,
it happens,
and it happens because you're passing around a board of moving pieces, and it has no catch at the bottom because they all need to slide out. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But that was a real pain point of this game, was if you accidentally drop that board or they slide out the bottom. Basically, you have to remember what order they were in because it's important to the decision of the next player.
Yes.
And I want to talk about the fact that the action that you select also has ramifications for the other players around the table, because there's a secondary action that all other players get to take. So when you select which action you're doing, you need to communicate to the table, I'm going to do this, which means that you all get to do this other thing.
Yeah.
And that's all meant to play out pretty much simultaneously. But the issue that I had with this game was that the flow of the game is very stunted.
Yeah.
It feels very start-stop. It feels very much like not only am I trying to think about what I'm going to do in my next turn, but I have to be paying attention to what you're doing, because then I need to take a secondary action that actually
move.
Then my secondary action might actually, then the opportunity to do a secondary action might change what I was actually intending to do. And therefore now I've got to rethink what I'm going to do. Plus, the action board is going to be passed to me, and I don't know what the previous player is going to take
by the time it reaches you.
So it's like now I need to rethink again, and so this game just has a lot of AP, and that really slows down the game. And on top of that, it's a long game to begin with. Like, we found it was almost an hour per player. So at a 4-player count, it's just it became quite painful, and the fact that your player boats, they move down the river and then they loop back around and you go back down the river. It felt like, oh my goodness, here we go again. Like, we've got to come all the way back down the river.
Groundhog Day. It's like, are we only halfway?
And then the decision, with the action selection, the fact that you're meant to be trading that off with the number of spaces you can move on the river, the river bonuses were never powerful enough to be like, I'm going to definitely choose the river bonus over the action that actually is going to give me lots more victory points. Like, that just never really factored in. It was more just avoiding the things that cost you victory points on the action selection board. Anyway, but the reason why I say it's the best of times and the worst of times is that some of the mechanics in this game I just absolutely adore. And one of them is not the action board, as you may have figured. But I really love the lever system.
Yeah.
So, like, unlocking these levers that then act as levers that you can kind of turn on and off to either use a bonus and then basically reactivate that bonus to be used again. I just really love that system. Yeah. And the way it works. I really appreciated the unique way you track your resources in this game, because rather than collecting physical resources, you've got these canoes or boats that move along a river, and you need to be in front of the resource that you're going to spend in order to be able to spend it. But then where your boat is positioned can cost you money to manipulate where it is. So that's like a puzzle in and of itself.
You get to upgrade those positions so that, some of them will become more powerful, and then you can also weighing that up with the cards that you're wanting to build, because that's what's going to be used as the cost for building certain things. So,
and then the card element was really fascinating, and it took a few games to understand how to build that engine, but I think once you get a hold of that, it can be really useful to your overall strategy as well. But another element that I really love is the end of round scoring, because there's this fascinating kind of puzzle where you need to be able to try to score something every round, and you have to choose which thing out of the 4 things you're going to score each round.
Like, all of them will have to be done.
Yes, you need to get them done at some point in the game. So that gives you some direction.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is if you choose not to fulfill one of the objectives that round, it gets harder for the subsequent round. So not only are you thinking, well, like, how am I going to do all these things? But at what point in time am I going to do them? Because then I need to time when I have that exact amount of that resource or whatever it is.
Yeah. And then you get penalized if you don't do it. So it's that whole thing of like things get better, but they can also get worse. But also you know that you're going to have to allocate one round to have completed, those different objects. So I agree. That's probably my favorite element of this in terms of like, that is so unique and it adds such an interesting focus to the game, as you said, but also tension to each round. And
it feels so hard.
Sometimes I feel really clever because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna bank this up for that final round, but then in the meantime I'm like, oh, but I need to like sort out these other things. And
so I really enjoyed that, but overall it just feels like not fun to play because it's long and clunky.
It's long for what you're doing. It's like, it feels like if I will happily sit down for a 3+ hour game if there feels like there's a lot of evolution and progress happening. But here it just feels like it's a grinding away, kind of like the same thing for not a lot of progress. So I think that's why it feels like it kind of overstays its welcome.
I know. I'm so sad about it because there are so many things that I hope get taken from this game and re-established into a new game. And I obviously really enjoy Alexander Pfister designs. And I don't know. There was just some really exciting mechanics delivered in a less than fun experience. So what did I give it?
I feel like it came fully together for us.
So I gave it a 6.9.
What did I give that? I gave it a 6.8 for me.
Similar rating.
Yeah, it was a similar rating.
Similar rating, but we will unfortunately move this on from our collection, which kind of, again, makes me a little bit sad because I do really enjoy some of the novel elements of the mechanics of that game. Next game.
Ooh, it's a
big one.
Big one. This is Scythe.
And we reviewed this quite early into ThinkerThemer.
And it's probably
It was one of our very early reviews.
But also, it was one of the first sets of minis that you painted.
It was, So during the pandemic.
You did an excellent job with that,
Well, I really enjoyed painting the minis of this. And I think that when I look at this game, I do get those nostalgic memories of like painting the figures, but also it reminds me of the fact that we went to Gen Con in 2016 and I believe that was the release of this game. And everyone was lining up for the game. And
what is that?
Yeah, back then we were just like...
Well, I was like, what is that? And you knew what the game was because you've always been more like in the know with the research.
But still, I didn't know a lot about it. Certainly didn't know a lot about Stonemaier Games. Like, just kind of like, what's happening?
Well, we knew enough because I remember you saying like we loved viticulture by that time, and you're like, it's the new one from the people from viticulture, and I'm like, oh wow, and you're like, yeah, but it's war, and then I looked at the cover and I was like, oh yeah, no, that's not for us at all, which was the thing that kept us from it for a long time. So I'll talk a little bit about the theme in Scythe. So Scythe looks very like warlike theme-ish, but what's happening is this takes place in the 1920s in Europa, which is like an alternative, not a real place, but kind of like an alternative history type setting after this world war, where you've got these the what do you call it, kind of like the desecrated or dilapidated land, and everyone's sort of like reeling back from after the war, and you have all these different factions, which is what you play as the different factions looking to, well, now that there's a sort of vacuum of power, well, if I gain enough popularity and I kind of play my cards right, then maybe I can be the next ruler and kind of so that's the sort of setting of this. So there will be a little bit of combat, but combat is not the central point of this game. It's not really a war game. It's really a resource management type game, and building up your popularity and completing all these different kind of objectives. Ultimately. So that's a bit on theme.
Yeah, and mechanically it's interesting because you have a player board, which is where you're going to be moving a worker around, but basically that worker is just going to track which action that you're going to take based on kind of the part of your player board that you're activating. And you can make the sections of your player board more powerful by removing pieces from the board. So you're going to be able to unlock things that are going to give you more benefits as you move through the game. But the way that I think about this game is kind of like a shopping list or a to-do list of items to get done in order to win the game. And when I look at this game, it's interesting because we have such different perspectives on this, because I kind of see through to the optimization puzzle, and Maggie is more, taken by the trimmings of this game. But for me, it is like a to-do list, because ultimately in this game, you want to, trigger kind of the end by collecting 6 stars. And the way you're going to get these stars is through a multitude of to-do list items that...
different accomplishments, let's say.
Different accomplishments in this game. That really are about, pulling different levers in this game, getting different things done that are going to give you those stars. And so... for me, it's interesting because in my mind, this game is, even though it looks nothing like it, the theme is nothing like it, but Tapestry is a more direct, I feel like it's a game that says, hey, here's these tracks.
Here's these levers, you can pull them.
Yeah, pull these levers. You need to move up these tracks. This is, whereas this is like, actually, underneath it all, it is really about moving the dial on all of these different things, but the way that it comes across is so much more...
See, I feel like, the bones, what you're talking about is like the skeleton and the structure is very similar. And I am so taken by the flesh on this that I'm like, but, there's this thing. And, and look at these good little, resources. And then, I can build this building over here. And look at the mech. And the mech can do this now. And so, Whereas to me, all of those trimmings are just a means to an end. And the experience of playing the game for me is just not interactive enough. So the battle is like there. You don't have to engage with it. Yes, there is one of those items on the to-do list is to engage, to have have done 2 battles. I actually really like, again, because I'm more of like a multiplayer solitaire, I really do enjoy the fact that they haven't played the paddle element is not as strongly here. And
and I'm not wishing for more.
Ignore it.
No, I'm not wishing for more battle. I don't enjoy battle style games, but certainly the interaction is really low. And because your worker placement is not really worker placement, is like the action selection system. It's very like, you're looking down at your own player board, you're thinking about what to move to where, and I don't really feel that much of a necessity to engage with what everybody else is doing on their turn. So I'm really just thinking about...
Excellent. I didn't want to engage. Let's do it.
For me, that it goes against my gaming preferences. I do enjoy it. I don't find it particularly thematic, aside from in those cards.
Those cards are, the encounter cards, where they give you these different options,
choose your own adventure.
Yeah, choose your own adventure. And some of them are really altruistic, and some of them are like, do you have to be so nasty? Like, do you have to be such a bastard and a jerk? And so I enjoy that, even though I agree, that's the only really truly sort of thematic element. But I think overall the reason this really comes together for me is because there are I do have all those levers, but for example, that's one of the things that I suffer with Tapestries. I feel like it just feels very almost like surgical, like you're doing this and it gives you this.
But that's how I feel. But that's how I feel about this.
That's interesting. It's like, where can you see all the beautiful artwork and all the...
I think because I just think through to, okay, well, clearly I just need to do this, and then this. And then, I feel like I'm doing that in isolation of the other players. And so it just kind of feels like, a very straightforward kind of...
What's your rating? I'll double check.
I feel like we're going to have a bit of a gap in this one if you haven't worked that out already. For me, Scythe is a 7.4.
Okay.
And basically, I enjoy the game. I'll play the game. I really loved painting the game. I think it's a really solid game. I can see why so many people really enjoy it. So, for me, it's one that I enjoy playing, but not one that's hugely up there for me.
For me, it's an 8.2. So this is my highest rating so far.
This is 8.2.
Because I really, I
feel like you loved it from the first time you played it. I feel like I don't know if part of it was the shock that it was so different to what I was expecting based on the cover artwork and my anticipation of what it would feel like, and that it was so much more Euro-y and so much more aligned to what I liked. But also, I'm going to say, I'm going to give you credit as well, because those beautiful minis really, and we have the upgraded components as well, and so all of that comes together to create this
this really tactile experience that, even though I agree it doesn't feel like the most thematically immersive like experience, it's still it's a strategy. It's like I feel like I'm in that strategy room, kind of going, okay, so how am I going to move these things around, and how am I going to, and I really enjoy it. It's like there's enough flesh and trimmings that I'm engaged the whole way through.
Yeah. That is Scythe.
So that's Scythe.
Yep.
Okay. Oh no, this is quite heavy now. I'm gonna have to maybe put it. Let's see if
slide it away.
Slide it here. Away. It'll be
Okay.
There you go.
The next one is a feast for Odin.
Ooh.
Oh, I just heard all the pieces moved
all
out.
the pieces.
That's fine. We'll sort out those hundreds, thousands of polyomino tiles.
That'll be a couple hours of fun for me later.
Well, I want to say something else about this list, in that when you have a subjective scale out of 10, you kind of want to create some anchor points so that I think as you get to know the way that we're scoring games, you understand what is a high score and what is a low score. And one thing I will say is we are rating things that we have generally purchased that are in our collection, so the whole scale is going to skew quite positive.
You should not be having things that are like, this is a 1 for me.
Yeah, because it's like, well, why is it here?
Yeah.
But, you know, we have already told everybody that our favorite game is A Feast for Odin. And I guess, you know, failing any discoveries in our collection that we hadn't thought about that's actually better than this, this is highly likely to be our number 1 game. And so I want to think about and talk about what our rating is to give you a bit of a sense of that top end of the scale as our collection currently stands.
Yeah.
So A Feast for Odin, if you don't know anything about it, is a worker placement game. One of our favorite mechanics. And Maggie refers to it as Viking Feng Shui.
Well, I didn't originate that.
Someone?
Yes. I believe it might have been Efka from No Pun Included. I think that's where. And I'm like, that is exactly what it is.
He does have a great way with words.
Yes. So I'm like, that is exactly what it is. So it stayed with me, and like now it's like, yeah, that's all you're doing.
Because what you're doing as Vikings is you're going out to collect different items in the shapes of polyomino tiles, and you're bringing them back home, and you're trying to rearrange them storage in your warehouses and on your player board to make them fit in a way that follows all of the rules of the game and is going to cover up the massive amount of negative victory points that you start with at the beginning of this game.
Overwhelmingly intimidating number of negative victory points that you start with.
So number 1, this game is stressful from the very beginning because you are just like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I'm in too deep.
Yeah.
I'm going to lose if I don't get anything done in this game.
You're not taking over this, organizing venture on good terms. You're not starting from a good ground. You're starting from this is a
very
disaster.
Stressful. This is a disaster. What are we going to do? And so you need to cover up all of these negative victory points, and you're going to be doing that by placing your workers out onto what seems like an overwhelming array of worker placement spots. So one thing that I think is the greatest barrier to entry with this game is when you look at the board, it is incredibly overwhelming with the number of options that you have available to you. But really, these are just different ways of getting different types of polyomino tiles. And some of them involve a little bit more luck. So if you are a luck-oriented person, which you can mitigate against, you can go out and go hunting. And if you are successful in your hunting, which does involve rolling a die and trying to, achieve a certain score, which you can mitigate if you work up to it, but ultimately still has an element of luck. If you're that kind of a gamer, you can do a lot of that. And that's going to give you these like animal furs and bones and meat and things that you can use to not only feed your Vikings, but also to put out on your puzzle board and cover that up. Or you can, build up your fleet of boats, which is going to allow you to access other lands.
Or go and explore and discover and trade goods.
And we'll come back to the theme in a moment. And also, the other part about this game is that you can build out your player board with more player boards. So you can go exploring and you can bring in new islands that are going to give you even more negative victory points that you need to cover up.
You get very ambitious, almost like too ambitious.
Too ambitious,
Which is one of the magical things of this game.
This is it. This is what I want to talk about. The thing about this game, and it's unlike any other game I've played, maybe a few games, but but I think it's very rare to have a game where you play it for the first time and you're
how?
just like, that's impossible. That is actually impossible.
Cannot be done.
Like, why? Like, I'm never going to cover my own player board. Why would I have additional player boards to try and cover up? Like, it seems like you're never going to get it done.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
And also, at the beginning of the game, it always feels like in 7 rounds, I'm not going to achieve anything.
Yeah. You always have the imposter syndrome of like, this is not happening.
This is never going to happen.
I'm dead. I'm already dead.
Yeah. And then as you get towards those later rounds of the game, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm actually going to do this. And not only am I going to do this, I'm going to have stuff left over. I'm going to have stuff that's wasted.
Gone in an island.
Why didn't I get more islands or more warehouses or more
space
to put all of these extra things that I have? And because of that, the tension of this game is like unmatched, I think. It's just because it feels even to yourself impossible. And then combined with the puzzle that is worker placement, where someone just takes the spot that you were intending to take. Making sure that you've got a backup plan, or that you can be opportunistic, or that you can shift and change with the flow of the game.
The simplicity of like that gradient of the location and the goods that you get based on the number of workers that you're placing, and then kind of going, I could take a couple of really amazing actions, but then that's it. Like I'm taking 2 actions, all my workers are used up, and it's done. Or you can kind of go very a lot more conservative, and then do like one little here, one here, one. And so you get so many turns, but they're all kind of, weaker action. And so like there's just so many, the decision space is so rich, I find.
Yes.
And then I'm not even going to get into the solo experience with this. Like my favorite solo, it's such a simple, straightforward way of playing a solo, and you get the same rich experience of the game, and you're essentially just blocking yourself, but it's just so easy to manage. There's no AI, I
really like in this game as well that you can pick a focus. So you might want to just breed animals, or you might just want to immigrate your people, and there's like all of these different things.
Build boats.
But the game kind of it feels like in every game you get this experience, but the more you play it, the more you get to explore the different paths to victory, and there are multiple paths to victory. And I also love the element of when you choose the treasures. So there's like these treasure pieces, and it feels like you're going shopping. You're going shopping, forging jewels, and you're like, well, I've got all these like great options to choose from. Which one best fits into my puzzle? And then the puzzle itself, the way it restricts you from placing certain color, 2 green pieces next to each other, it makes for this like really actually challenging spatial puzzle.
And then the feeding of your Vikings every round, it's like there's just like
there's so many pressures on you. And and we love that in game. If you watch this channel, you'll know that we're always looking for the tension in the game, and this game has it in spades, coming from all different places. I'm going to talk about my rating. I should know this off by heart. Well, my rating for A Feast for Odin is 9.5. And what is your rating?
It's a 9.5.
Oh, it's a 9.5.
thing that we agree on.
So we both love this game, and if you think about what that means, we have very different taste in games. Obviously, I'm more mechanically driven. Maggie is more theme driven. This has both. And they come together in a beautiful way that really creates this experience that we love.
Like rich thematic narrative, I'm gonna say that it's, but I do, like I have found always be like, I'm gonna, I'm gonna go with this with like the agricultural thing, or I'm gonna like look at my
go out to the forest and get some resources.
It's like I'm gonna get these sheds, I'm gonna get these islands and fill them with stuff. So I always do talk about it in terms of the action, and I feel like most people do. It's not like I'm gonna get a black cube, I'm gonna get a blue cube, I'm gonna get a this. It's like you're talking about in terms of like I'm gonna go hunting, I'm gonna go this, so it does feel like, okay, I'm gonna be doing these things. I mean, less thematic that you're then getting a polyomino.
I mean, it is very, ultimately it's very puzzly, but just having the images on those polyomino tiles makes it feel like you are winning something that you've worked for in a thematic way.
Absolutely.
So it's like, of course I would get these bones and this fur and this meat from, hunting this animal. Like, that makes sense. I want to talk about why it's not a 10 out of 10.
Why is it not a 10?
There are a couple of reasons here. Obviously, 9.5 is extremely high, so you can see how much we love this game. The first thing is, I want to talk about a couple of thematic elements. There is pillaging in this game. There is whaling in this game. both two elements that I don't particularly enjoy, like having in
historically accurate. Like, it's the things that were done, but it's like, from a gaming experience, you don't feel
but
good.
They're not elements that need to be in there necessarily. And I forgot what I was going to say just on that. Nope, it's completely gone.
Oh, I don't know what else you're going to say.
No, I was thinking about the theme, but no, I've forgotten what that is. But the other thing I want to talk about is the cards, the different career,
the
profession cards. I don't enjoy that element of the game as much.
I don't use it. I don't mind it, but I definitely underuse it. And I know there's people, like, we're probably not very card-driven people.
Yeah.
And I know that there's people that really love that. And, like, for example, with some of Uwe's other games, like, that element is so... It's such a big component, and it's where a lot of the more fine, like the finessing of strategy, and when you have really strong players playing, one another, that's the thing that will make the difference.
Yeah, I remember the theme thing, but yeah.
Oh yeah.
It was just that, I talked about hunting animals. I feel like some people will not enjoy that. If you're, for example, if you're vegan or something, or just like the idea of hunting animals is not for you, then that element is also,
fair. Like
I think that's most people.
Yeah.
But in terms of the animal hunting as well, that could be. So there are elements of this theme that are quite off-putting as like actions that you would take as a Viking.
Yeah.
So there's that element which brings it down a little bit in my estimation. Then there's the profession cards.
Yeah. I agree with the elements of theme is what brings it down for me. Even though like from a gaming experience for the rest of it, it's like it's close to the perfect game.
So this is the other reason why it can't be a 10 out of 10 for me. I feel like the Norwegians expansion is a necessity.
That's true.
And when we're talking about a rating of a base game that requires a quite expensive expansion to feel complete, for that reason I can't give it a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
I think the Norwegians, in particular, the new board that tightens up the game for a lower player count, extremely important. There's new polyomino tiles. It downplays the ability of someone to win just through immigration alone. And it even makes the card element better as well.
And it brings horses.
And it brings horses, and the horses are really cool. And so, I feel like for that reason as well, is like, it's kind of, you need to have that expansion. And so for that reason, but having said that, it's okay to start with the base game because the base game has so much game in it. It has so much game in it. And you're not going to realize those little things that the expansion brings and makes better until you're really familiar with the base game. So if you haven't tried the base game, get the base game first. Play it for as long as you can until you want something new. And then the Norwegians is really going to add to the experience. And also you'll be able to recognize the parts that are made better.
Yeah.
So that is an extremely high rating for our favorite game, A Feast for Odin.
Which would kind of open the question of, does that mean that there's no game that will ever get a 10?
No.
Not necessarily.
I'm never ruling that out.
Exactly.
And it also opens a window, a 0.5 of a window for a game to outperform
designers and publishers out there. This is the challenge for you.
Now's your time. Bring us in a game that we like better than Feast for Odin. Okay.
Give us that 10.
Next game.
Oh, now I'm really excited. And look, I'm gonna digress. I know like some people are kind of looking at this going, just get to the next game. But every time I play a new game, that is my hope. Like the hope is this is going to be this could potentially be my new 10. Like
this could be the 10 out of 10.
This could be it's that sense of excitement and discovery going in that makes it so addictive but so compelling to like chase the hotness,
chase the perfect game.
What's this new thing that people are talking about? What's this new thing that this designer, that I've loved before? Like, what have they come up with next? That's always like beating that. That's always the hope. Where's the 10? All right, is this the 10?
Is this the 10?
Is this the 10?
This is Ark Nova, which is a game that has done incredibly well. It's a fairly new game. I think it's from last year, 2021. It rocketed up the BGG charts. It now sits at number 4. Number 4 in a strategy category. Number 4 overall as the best game. Overall as well as the best games of all time. So let's talk about Ark Nova. We of course did a full review of this game, but what are you trying to do in this game thematically?
So, you are a zoo builder. I guess you're the zoo owner, and you're trying to create the best zoo, but also at the same time make sure that you're balancing not just like, you know, having a lot of attractions and a lot of animals and bringing people through the door and making a lot of money, but also having a good balance of conservation efforts. So doing that responsibly and making sure that obviously all your animals have the right ecosystem or space to exist in. That's essentially it. So there's going to be a lot of animals and a lot of building and a lot of managing different...
Yeah, and there's a few different elements to this game, because there's certainly a big part of this game is hand management. So you're going to have a handful of cards that represent not only, well, first of all, different animals. So they all represent the, you know, actual animals with their proper name, and you're going to be able to place those animals, not physically place them, but definitely add them to a tableau that is going to represent the animals that exist in different enclosures on your zoo map board. And on this zoo map board, you're going to have to build out those enclosures. So it's a balance of making sure you've got the space available for these animals and then playing them out of your hand. But the other thing is there's a lot of synergies going on with different regions and different types of animals that are going to allow you to build out your zoo in a faster way. You can also have partnerships with different regions or other zoos around the world, and that's also going to help you get more things done.
Yeah.
But so that's one element of the game. If you've played Terraforming Mars, you will definitely resonate with that card play in your hands. The hand management and the synergy of things that are going to allow you to get more done faster.
And the cards, because of, you know, with the animals, it's the particular, you know, if they're a reptile, if this is the particular type and the particular region that they're from, and like all those things kind of playing off each other.
Yeah, they all interact with each other. But then my favorite element of this game is the way you take actions, or the action selection mechanism for this game is a series of 5 cards that are in front of you at the bottom of your player board. And you are simply going to be choosing which one you want to use, and therefore the action that you're going to take. But what's really interesting is across the top of the spaces where these cards exist, there is a power to that card from 1 to 5. And the cards refer to X. And X is going to be the number, or the number of times you get to do something, or the power of that action that you get to have. And that interacts with where it's positioned. And what happens is, once you take one of those actions out, all the other cards are going to slide up. And another way of saying that is the actions are going to be becoming more powerful.
And that action is now the weakest.
Yes, right. So the less often or the less frequently you take an action, the more powerful it's going to become. The longer you leave it until you take that action, the more powerful it's going to become. If you want to take an action more frequently, it's going to be constantly at the lower end of that spectrum. And so it's going to be less powerful, but you get to do it all of the time. And so there's another element of action management, if you will, because you are trying to be efficient in the way you use actions by waiting until they get to the top of that track where they're going to be at their most powerful. And then when they're at their most powerful, you better make sure that you've got everything you need.
Everything's lined up.
Yeah, to make that happen when you use it. And so that for me is just incredibly interesting. It's the most interesting part of the game. It's about ensuring that you're managing your hand in line with managing those actions. And then the cool thing is you get to upgrade those actions.
But you won't get to upgrade all of them.
You won't get to upgrade all of them. And that's what brings in the variability into the game. So you're like, okay, this time I'm going to really focus on these types of actions. So maybe you want to make your drafting more powerful from the central pool.
And like get more money or whatever.
Yeah, and so you can turn them over to their opposite sides, but you only get to do that when you meet certain conditions on your player board or on the track in the center of the board. And so that also makes for an interesting, like, what for this game am I going to upgrade and how is that going to help me get ahead? And then the other interesting thing about this game is that you are trying to influence 2 tracks, the amount of income that your zoo is generating and the conservation efforts of your zoo. And these 2 tracks cross over, ideally. You want them to cross over.
If you play your cards right, literally.
And such that you're going to be basically subtracting one track from the other. And so a score of 0 is actually really good, which is hard for people to get their heads around. And then a score of 20 is going to be like excellent. And you're like trying to get this high score, which is actually not that high, but you're having to put so much effort into making it work. So it won't go into, obviously we've reviewed this game, won't go into how it works in too much more detail, but how it feels to play is an interesting one, because for me, the game has really low amounts of interaction with other players. The title of our review was Multiplayer Solitaire.
Yeah, which I thought was very apt. There are some cards that allow you to kind of do semi-mean things to other players, but they're very, very rare. And it's almost like the game is clearly not geared towards that. And so we very rarely find ourselves using them. Yeah. And it's almost like a bit of a... and like it's not that inconvenient, like it's inconvenient, but it's not like a devastating blow. It's such a minor part that it's like I might as well not even have them.
And so the game, I really like the elements of the mechanics of the game, but for me, this game is too much multiplayer solitaire. It feels like everyone, again, when all the action selection is taking place in your own player board, it creates this dynamic where everyone's just looking down at their own player board. And for me, I like head-up games. I like games where you're like, what are you doing over there and how is that going to impact on me? And there are some elements of not interaction, but definitely things you need to keep an eye on when someone might cause a break, because that challenges the timing of things that you're trying to get done in the game.
Taking a card that you might be after from the kind of display market.
Drafting a card. And that's the other element that I wanted to talk about in this game is like the frustratingness of the cards. Because
there's a lot of cards. Yeah. And sometimes the deck is, which is good from a replayability point, because you're not going to be like, I'm always going to see the same groups of cards. But it means that sometimes the cards that you need might be buried to the point where you may not actually see them this game.
Yeah. And so you go in with a strategy and you're like, okay, I'm going to create a petting zoo. And then those animals just never turn up, and it's just super frustrating. And yes, you can pivot and change your strategy, but it would be nice if you could realize your strategy. And I think that that's the difference between this and Terraforming Mars, is that in Terraforming Mars, you're drafting cards. And so it feels like you have more control over the card element of the game. Whereas in this, that the central market of cards doesn't get refreshed often enough for you to see more and have that opportunity to really build on your strategy. So when I play this game, yes, there's things that I want to get done, but in terms of the card play, it's like about being opportunistic in a way as well, and like just hoping that something that works with the synergies that you've built up appears in that market, and when it does, you better be prepared to grab it. Yes.
Well, for me, I think interestingly, I love multiplayer solitaire, and so I should really, really love this. And I think for me, the thing that makes me not super love this is, as we've been talking about, like that luck element of like, sometimes I'm the type of person that loves to think up front, okay, this game I'm going to focus on this, and it's not always possible to do, because sometimes if you just are not getting the cards, and you may not get the cards at all in this entire game, you're gonna have to pivot, and then it's like, but then I didn't get to sort of see how that thing played out for me. So that's one element that kind of brings it a bit down. The other thing is, like, interestingly, as you were just talking about Terraforming Mars, I realized one of the elements that I love the most about Terraforming Mars is like the dials that you're kind of bringing up as you're terraforming. You're together kind of contributing to this one thing. And even though that's almost like a co-op little element that in and of itself, it shouldn't, like, you're still getting individual points for the things that you're doing. I really enjoy that in that game, and also sort of physically seeing how this one central place is coming together, whereas here, we all have our own individual zoo, but I have no interest in what you're doing, no investment in what you're doing. No. And even though I am a multiplayer solitaire person, it's like, for a game that is so spiritually kind of similar to Terraforming Mars, I do really enjoy those elements in Terraforming Mars.
That there's something happening in a central...
There's something happening that we're all kind of together contributing towards, even though ultimately, you are playing a competitive kind of game.
Yes.
I do like this theme more in general. Like the animals, I tend to like more than space. But if I compare the two, I would usually probably want to play that like terraforming more.
And I, as much as I appreciate the mechanics in this game, the lack of interaction really drags it down for me. I actually enjoy the scoring mechanism, the two tracks overlapping, which Maggie really struggles to get her head around. Yeah. And she's like, but how? Doesn't it mean you can cross over wherever and like race to zero?
Here's the thing, it's like for someone, because you have, we were debating this and how you're like, yeah, but a 0 is a good score. Like a 0, because the whole point is that you cross them over. And I'm like, yeah, but like if I'm building something, I want to have, it's like it can be a 0 because, I made it all the way through and then they cross at this point, or it can be a 0 because I made this one all the way through. Yeah. And it's like they're completely different experiences or developments. And then how is it that I'm going to have the same result? But that's just how my
I feel like the thematic overlay, whereas I view it very mathematically.
Because this is something that upset me in one game where I was getting really frustrated because it's like there was this one thing that I really wanted to try. And then I was like, but I might as well just try and race one of them and then just make sure that I have a really, really like powerful final turn, because ultimately, yes, you have to make sure that they, it's the end of game triggers when they cross, but the person who wins is who has the highest distance between those 2 points.
But that only matters if it's a close game. Yeah. So it only matters in first and second place generally, where you want to have that really powerful final move so that the game end is triggered and you're as far forward as you can possibly be. Yeah. So that is an interesting thing about the timing of the last move.
Yeah, but I felt like thematically it just didn't make sense to me. No. That why would you be so rewarded or not rewarded just for, say, if it was a close game and everyone did the right thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, you still have to work really hard to get to that point.
But it's like, the fact that like you win because you're like, I just optimized that final, turn the most. It's like, like thematically, I kind of felt like, but I did so much work. Like there was so much, I did such a great job with this building of and it's like, it felt like that was for nothing.
Anyway, what did you give Ark Nova?
What did I give Ark Nova? I can't even find. I gave Ark Nova a 7.7.
7.7, that's still very high. Yeah, I gave Ark Nova a 7.9, and I debated whether to give it an 8 or a 7.9 for a long time. And ultimately, I think that there are so many elements that I really enjoy, but then, as in I enjoy the mechanics of, but then the level of fun that I'm having when I'm playing the game, because I feel so isolated in what I'm doing, it feels so solo for me that I'm just like, well, there are other things I'd rather get off the shelf. So that's what's holding it back.
I think for me, it's like every time a game of this finishes, I never feel like I get the satisfying payoff for the hours of investment and the amount of work that I put into it. And I can't even articulate why that is. It's always like, okay. so there's why my 7.7, even though I think there's a lot of really great things.
It's a really great game. Yeah, it's a great game, and a lot of our friends really enjoy it, so it will definitely be staying in our collection. That is Ark Nova.
All right. We got through the first 10.
The first 10
out of 10.
And this is a really long episode, so we're going to have to think about, maybe being a little bit more snappy about our evaluations, but would really, really appreciate and love your feedback on this new series of videos. We want to keep making them. We want to continue to rate our entire collection. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something new about our preferences or taste based on giving it a very specific number.
Wow, they're really harsh, even with stuff that they like.
Or does it add nothing? Really what were the surprises to you? I'd love to hear about that in the comments. It will help us shape the rest of the series. Are there games that you want to see us rate next? Let us know, and we'll try and put them into the next 10 that we rate. But if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to the channel, and we will be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.